that you struggle with, that constantly pops up in your life, might not be the same exact thing that challenges Brother Ivy. But I guarantee you, there is a besetting area. There is one that just wants to hold on in your life. And Brother Ivy, there is one that just wants to hold on in your life. And there is one that wants to hold on in my life. I'll take it a step further, too, by the way, and tell you, all of it comes from the root of pride. It is the original sin. It is the root of sin. And we don't like that because nobody likes to be pictured as proud. But the quicker we would accept that, the quicker we can start to win the battle over our besetting sin. Because it does revolve around self, around me, around power, around my needs, around my thoughts, around my views. So, a couple of things we have to look at. First, every one of us is tempted. I mean, I'll go a step further. I always talk to that side. It seems like a good thing, though, because that side keeps getting bigger and bigger. So maybe you guys are missing attention. All right, so here you go. Brother Hanks, that is why it is such a evil sin when we who have received grace want to give out malice. Every one of us have failed. Yet we want to sit there and pick which sin we're going to go after and hold accountable, which person we're going to write off, and which we'll understand and allow. Wait a minute. Brother Ray, that happens in some churches, but not this church. I'm going to tell you that's the battle of Christianity. I'll go so far as this too. If I be lifted up, I'll draw all men. You know what we lift up? We lift up His grace, His mercy, His love. Because that makes Him approachable. If you go through all the things that He was accused of, I'm not going through these points very fast. If you go through all the things He's accused of, you know there was one that He truly could be found guilty of? Have you ever thought about that? Because Jesus was a friend of sinners. Now you go back and look. Look at the people who approached Him. Lepers approached Him. Women approached Him. A Samaritan spoke to Him. He was approachable. You know, when we're humble, when we who've received grace give grace, you know what that makes us? It makes us approachable. It allows us to be used. But when we're full of condemnation and malice, we become the dividers. You know who the author of division is? Well, he sure uses us sometimes. Anyway, before we look at these things, first I just want to do this. I want to say, let's tear down all the borders that make it say, not me. And let's realize every man is tempted. Now, here's the second part. Ready for this? You'll like this. I'm back on this side again. You will love this. You ready for this genius thing? I just love it when this happens, too. I have to point it out every time. You know where Genesis 39 comes? Right after Genesis 38. You know what's important about Genesis 39? What we see in Genesis 39? We see a man suffer for the sin of a woman. You know what happens in Genesis 38? We see a woman suffer for the sin of a man. Both in this physical arena. Tamar and Judah, and Potiphar's wife and Joseph. That is not accidental. In fact, if you're going through that and read it, you're like 38 is in the wrong place. If you start back here like 25 and you just keep going and going and going, and you're like, 38 is in the wrong place. Why is this chapter stuck right here? Well, when you read 39, I know why this chapter is stuck right here. Because no gender has a monopoly on this temptation. And sometimes, we who are male, only two genders. The male gender, we like to do the blame thing. And the female gender, Sammy, what female in the world wants to be associated with Potiphar's wife? So anytime it comes up, you just look at him. I wouldn't look at him either. I knew she was thinking it. But it is important that we don't just push this off, because it is a temptation in both areas. And for a long time, one or the other like wins the balance or loses the balance, however you want to look at it. And we just need to realize it exists on both sides. In high school, we just need to speak this to the boys. What, are you crazy? Well, you don't know our girl. We need to speak to the girls. No one has a monopoly. Okay. That being said, here we go. 3 things I'm going to try to do this morning with the time that's left, which is not going to happen. We're going to jump to the end. No matter what happens, we got to get the end. I love the end. We'll see when temptation is at its strongest. We're going to try to take a quick look at how Joseph stood against temptation. And then the end. What happens when we're faithful? Because it's a beautiful picture. So, here you go. When is temptation the strongest, especially in this area, in the area specific to what Joseph was challenged? Well, first is obvious. When is physical temptation the strongest? When you're young and single. Joseph was 27, 28 years old and still not married. Now, in our society, the not married would not be a problem, but not being active would be a problem. Because being active in this area is considered essential and normal. So if you're going to be normal, you must be active. Now, I'm trying to be sensitive to the topic, but we know this is true. But if a person takes the biblical view, not active until, and then locked to one, they will face immediate attack. Do you understand why this is? Because if I push the lie, Brother Ivy, if I push the lie that to be normal, you must be active, and you are happy, joyful, successful, and not active, you are instant confrontation to my lifestyle. If not, conviction. If nothing else, you make me review it and analyze it. I must tear you down. I must make you weird. I must make you some kind of crazy loon. Because you cause conflict with what I teach, preach, believe, make decisions. You challenge my decision-making process, which is, by the way, I must please me some me. So, 1. No longs. Gotta get back. So when you're young and single. 2. Here you go. When you're good looking. Let's be honest. When you're good looking, you face more temptations in this area than others. And someone say, no, everybody's equally beautiful to someone. There's an old preacher who used to be on the radio, then he went on TV. He's quoted off the time because his deacon came up to him and said, preacher, I just want to tell you something. You've got a face for radio. I never mind being recorded. I hate being on camera. I know which category I'm in. The preacher wants to stand up here and say the good-looking one. Let me just say, if you're in this gifted group, you face more pressures and temptation than those of us who aren't. And in a minute, I'm going to tell you why. But know this. Know that flesh is deceitful and beauty is vain. Know that. Know that if you have beauty and put your trust in it, there's challenge and pain and heartbreak coming. Now, that's an easy thing to say. But the truth is, if you went to the school, every person in that school longs to be beautiful. We grow up longing to be in that group. I wish I looked like him. I wish I had hair like her. I wish. No, we should all be well groomed. And I'm going to tell you, seeking beauty is a challenge. And it means we don't understand the temptation that's there. We should learn to be content. Because what happens is, content? Here, how can you be content? How can you be content? Junior has so many more advantages. Look, he walks into people and people want to hire him because of the way he looks. He'll always have the advantage. And I will never have all of the temptation and challenge that he does. It's easy to learn to be thankful for that. Lord, I'm thankful I'm not in that group. Because I struggle in the group I'm in. If I was in that group, you know how much I can handle. We should learn to be content. Now, why does that group, see, you're one of them beautiful people. You know this. You know why that group faces more temptation? Let me push this back. Let me push it one more, because there's one more I need to throw in there. Okay? Joseph was also successful. You know how you get successful? You work hard. You know when you're tempted? After you've worked hard and you become successful. Because temptation just shows up. Joseph, for 10 years or 11 years, almost single focus. I'm going to bless my master. As a result, multiple promotions. It is understandable. Miss Tammy, is it not understandable that he's tired? He's tired of always sacrificing, because that's what you have to do. He's tired of constant effort. He's drained. You got to be careful, because I hear this all the time in the church. Well, don't worry, so-and-so. Here we go. Don't worry, Joseph. You deserve a reward for all the things you've done. You've worked so hard. Let me tell you, it would have been easy for Joseph to tell himself that. And it's not like he went knocking on this door. This door opened to him, and I deserve, after I've made him rich, and I've. It'd be so easy to do. Here's 4. And you'll see this one. 1, 2, and 3. Young, good-looking, and successful. You know what that creates? And here's when temptation is at its strongest. When there's opportunity. Those 3 things create opportunity. The young kid going to college has a lot more opportunity in this area than me. I go to work, I come home. I go here. Not much opportunity in any of those places. The good-looking thing, we already covered that. The young and successful thing, no one looks at me and says, oh, what a hunk of man. They're waiting outside the gym for that guy. They're wearing their little onesie-tightsy things. I don't know what they're called. I don't have girls. There are times when we may struggle because of desire, but we don't have opportunity. Those times are tough, but we don't have opportunity. There are times when we have opportunity, but we don't have desire. Brother Maddox, those times are tough. But at the time, we have desire and opportunity. That is a lethal mix. That is super strong temptation. Now, the Bible gives us some things. That's why we think on these things. That's why we flee. That takes care of both of those areas. But I'm telling you, when those 2 areas come together, that's very tough. They're coming together here. And he's young, youthful, separated. He's 27, 28 years old. Oh, that clock. I hate that clock. I think it has a plug. I should unplug that clock. When we're away from home. When we're away from home, there's something disorienting about being away from home. Now everyone's going, oh yes, when those traveling businessmen check into those hotels. Okay, but what about when we're on the cruise? What about when we take the vacation where we'll go places, drink things, say things, do things that we would not do here? There is something weakening about being away and being alone. There's like no more rules. There's no more responsibility. There's just this weird freedom nobody knows. By the way, Angie, people ask me this all the time. If you don't know, I'll fill you in if you don't know. My wife often takes vacations without me. You should talk to her. People often say, aren't you worried? Well, let me tell you this. Why she takes vacations without me. First, no pat on the back, but I struggle with calling the preacher, say I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks. At some point, it just seems like you're not holding this as responsible as you should. If you're constantly, I need an exception, I need an exception, I need an exception, I need an exception, do you realize the position that God has put you in? So I do struggle with saying, I need off this Sunday. There aren't that many Sundays. Second, I'll do this. My wife takes long vacations. She does not like 2 or 3 days. She likes 2 weeks, and a little before and a little after. Well, I don't know that usually I could get that much time off. That would be hard for me. And 3, you ready? My wife likes long vacations. That costs moolah. There's very little you could do that is worth that much moolah to me. Like when she goes, it's $4,000 or $5,000. $4,000 or $5,000 is enough to make me go. You know what happens if I go? It's $8,000 or $10,000. That's enough to make me stay home. Now here's the last thing. So let me just I get this out corporately, and then I don't have to keep answering this individually. It is her traveling companions. Most of the time when my wife goes on a vacation, she is surrounded by 80-year-old women. I would be the only one in the other gender around, which means you carry all the bags for every 80-year-old woman. You listen to every 80-year-old woman's conversation. You learn about every doctor, about every medicine, about every, no. And I'm going to pay $5,000 for this? But I will say this, Brother Maddox, I trust my wife. But it is comforting knowing she's going on a vacation with her mom. It is comforting knowing she's going with her aunt, who might be 92. Because it just makes that, it's a little different when you're away. I know, it's worse when you're away. We need to understand that being that away thing does increase temptation. And that rolls into this when there's no accountability partner. Joseph had no one. There's no dad, there's no mom, there's no brothers, there's no wife, there's no one. Increased temptation. Seventh. Third after that. When temptation is constant for a long time. But it truly is not hard to say no once. But you see verse 10? And it came to pass as she spake to Joseph day by day. This starts out with her saying, lie with me. I just, this is just giving us the cliff notes, Brother Maddox. I do not believe that she said, hey, by the way, our first conversation, lie with me. There was some flirting. There was some winking. There was some creating. She got her way lots of times. She expected it to get this time. When she didn't, that just made her more aggressive and more aggressive and more aggressive. And he continued to, until finally she just took right up to, lie with me. And his answer, oh, no, I don't know what you're thinking about. This ain't going to happen. It didn't stop once. Then day after day after day after day. And we know this wears you down. That's why we talk about things like, let's talk to our children. The constant environment. So the music you listen to is going to have an effect. Why? Because it constantly wears you down. It changes your viewpoint. The things you watch on TV, it constantly wears you down. It changes your viewpoint. The movies, it constantly, the people you're around, the influences, the peer pressure, it constantly wears you down. You know who lives in that same world? Us adults. And you know what it does? It constantly wears us down. Which, by the way, is why we need to look around and from time to time say, I haven't seen that person in a couple weeks. Because if they haven't been around in a couple weeks, they're getting wore down. And you know when this happens the most? Would be like from now till middle of January. Because when everybody takes their vacations and they're gone, and then it's tougher to come back, and then you're busy, and then you have to catch up on work, and then you have to, yeah, it's right now. So, whew. So here's Joseph. He's young, he's attractive, he's successful, he has opportunity, he's away, he's alone, and there's continual attack. But Wayne, it looks like a recipe for disaster, doesn't it? But Joseph was yet without sin. How does this happen? Because just about everything you can think of is thrown on him right there. There's a couple you could throw out, like from Job. Job was sick. Job was suffering loss. Okay, you could throw those things in. But minus those, there's not much you could see Joseph is missing in temptation. Everything's ready. Like when does the enemy attack? Well, they attack at night because they want to sneak up, or they attack at dawn because you're sleepy and not ready, or there's times they attack. Every time a temptation is at its strongest and going to attack. Joseph is going through this. But how does he end up resisting? Well, there are three things we can see from this same passage. In 39, verse 9, there is none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? Joseph had already settled. He had already committed in his head, I cannot do this. You see, Brother Ray, before she did day after day after day after day, you know what he had already decided? This is a no way. So day after day after day, you know what it was? No way, no way, no way. Because it was settled. A godly life revolves around having things settled, having commitment in the head. We live in a time where it's like open mind. An open mind is a good thing. An open mind is we'll see when it happens. We'll see what I feel like at that time. We'll see. You know, the mind has the incredible ability to deceive itself in what's good for him. God comes and he frees our mind and he gives us his word and he gives us truth and he reveals things to us so we can now see. And if we're not careful, we spend the rest of the time trying to darken it back up. So where is there wait and see? Some things need to be settled. And Joseph already had some things settled. Joseph has settled that God's way is best, and this is what he says. In fact, I don't even like that phrase, God's way is best. It should be God's way is preeminent. This Max, you know what preeminent? This is the easy. I've been asked to define this a number of times because it's like using the word. It makes me sound smart, I think. All right, so here's the definition I would use. Preeminent does not mean it's the top thing on the list. Preeminent means it's the only thing on the list. So he had settled. It was preeminent. God's way is best. When things come in my life, I want my life to be marked by God's way. And that takes some of that battle away. Now, for it to stay preeminent, it requires us to know him, to trust him, to maintain strong relation with him. And we got David, a man after God's own heart. All those things are true at one point. At one point, it was settled. But as time passed and got softer, it got softer. Those things were written in different colors. That means I really wanted to make sure we covered them. But it's like, 2, not only does it need to be settled, but it needs to be clearly communicated. You know, we really don't need to be sneaky. We need to communicate love before we communicate truth, while we communicate truth, after we communicate truth, but we need to communicate truth. And Joseph said, no. Not for me, not here, not now, not tomorrow, not ever, no. Not let's see, not let's talk about it. Not some shy, don't want to offend you. But Marvin, you realize offending her could cause him great damage. He realized this too. But there were some things he needed to be clear, and he was. 3, there were some boundaries there. He did not continue to open this door. In fact, it goes on in 39 verse 10. It says he wouldn't listen. Day after day after day, he didn't want to listen. He didn't want to play. He didn't want to have an open mind. He had a settled mind. He was settled in his words, and that led to controlling, resisting in his action. Those are wonderful things, right? Yeah, those are wonderful things. I can't wait to tell that to like the 13-year-old. Wonderful things. None of that blows any mind in here. We all know that. It makes sense. That's just common sense. The issue is usually not understanding that. It's having the motivation to live in that. Now, we get to see some of this from him, too. We get to see the picture of his motivation. And in verse 39, verse 8, he says this, but he refused and said unto his master's wife, there's enough right there. You know what he realized? He realized that when I look at myself, am just a servant. Not thinking more highly of himself than he ought. Here's his picture. He has a master. That changes. Brother Maddox, you realize when we have a master, we really don't get to make our decisions. Well, that goes against our thoughts. He had a master. His job was to please the master. More than that, his master had been good to him. He wanted to be loyal to his master. We like to be free agents. But we are bought with a price. The minute we choose him, we are bought with a price. It is that wonderful picture of the bondservant. Brother Ivy, that's a wonderful picture. Let me give you a better picture than the bondservant. You know what the bondservant would be doing at dinner? He would be serving dinner. Brother Ray, you ready? He doesn't want us to serve dinner. He wants us to sit at the table and eat dinner. Oh, okay. A child, a co-heir could sit at the table. That's pretty impressive. He doesn't even want us just to be co-heirs. It's a little weird. It is a little weird. It's just a little weird to say. But he wants to love us and us to love him. It's a lover's relationship. It's an intimate, one-on-one relationship. As wonderful as I like that bondservant picture, there's some protection in that bondservant picture. Yep. He wants more than that for us. He wants us to say, it is all of my heart to want to please you and make you smile. You don't have to tell me these are the rules. This is my desire. He realized he had a master. 2, he saw sin as it was. This great wickedness. Now, we can make it sound good. We can soften it. But the promise is it will bring destruction and it'll bring pain. And that's how Joseph saw it. He didn't rename it. He didn't try to recondition it. This great wickedness that is sin. Brother Ivy, I'm going to go back to the beginning. Remember we go to the beginning? Oh, yeah. Yeah, this. But there are lots of sins. You know, like for us to refuse to forgive. For us to steal. For us to covet. For us to manipulate. For us to... There are lots of things we try to hold on to. You know what all of them are? They're all sin. None of them get to be renamed. And they all bring destruction and pain. And they all tie to pride. I'm running out of time. Yeah. And then third, because I want to jump to the last one, he saw his sin as against God. Do this great wickedness against God. It would sadden there. If we could see the pain, if we could see the destruction. Okay, when we talk about that, Brother Matt, we usually talk about the pain and destruction here. But I'm talking about if we could see the pain of the one who loves us. But we don't get to see or feel until after. It's one of the great deceptions of Satan. Somehow it gets blocked. Here. But here's my favorite part. 2 minutes. We can do this. What happens to Joseph when he was faithful? Well, I just want you to follow the chain of this story. Because Joseph was faithful, what happens? He goes to prison. Well, Jamie, where are you going? Okay, well, because he's in prison, what happens? He meets a cupbearer. Okay, so he meets another prisoner. Well, because he meets this other prisoner, he meets Pharaoh. Because he meets Pharaoh, he becomes viceroy, second in command of all of Egypt. Because he becomes second in command of all of Egypt, he's able to provide food in the famine. Because he is able to provide food in the famine, what happens? The line of Judah is saved. No. Who is the line of the tribe of Judah? Christ is born. Now, because Christ is born, there is an abundant nation of the in Christ in heaven for all eternity, singing with joy and praise to the Lord. Do you think Joseph saw the consequences, the result of what it would be for him to be faithful? There you go. I like that. Not a chance. But that's what God does. Amen. When we are faithful. It's the picture of the rock and the ripples in the water. There's always going to be ripples. There's going to be ripples like David's ripples. Not the same. The destruction ripples, the painful ripples from David. Or there's going to be ripples like Joseph's ripples. Now here, just last thought. There are a lot of correlations here in Joseph's life. Tempted in all points, yet without sin. A lot of correlations to God, to Christ. But there's one major difference. See, when Joseph was tempted, he ran from Potiphar's wife. When Jesus, the Son of God, was tempted, Satan runs because he is God. Not exactly the perfect type. By the way, close in a word of prayer.